So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our online UX meetup. This time we are welcoming Kevin McCarthy, and Kevin will share his experiences with scaling design teams at Maersk. Kevin is a UX expert with over 20 years of experience in studying user needs and converting them into desirable solutions. And as I said before, we can see a lot of people joining online, so we are very happy about that. So I hope you have had a lovely morning so far. The agenda for today is, as always, that I will talk about all the practicalities, and then I'll give the word and screen to Kevin. As always, we'll try to keep track on time. We know this is very important to you, so we'll try to do our best. You can ask questions in the QA section in Zoom just below, but due to time constraints, we never are able to go through all questions. So that's why we have made this behind the talk afterwards, where Kevin will answer all relevant questions. And the recording of that will be sent out during the next couple of weeks. And concerning that, we have actually been discussing in Preely that if that's actually a format you like, or if we should just extend these meetups for maybe half an hour or more, so you will have the normal talk as you have as today. And then we'll have, for instance, 30 minutes of questions afterwards. So let us know afterwards if that would be something you would be up for, or if you like the behind the talk as is as well. You will also receive Kevin's slides after the presentation, so everything should be good there. For those of you who does not know Preely, Preely is a self-service platform for unmoderated remote user testing. It consists of 3 areas where you can create your test and distribute it. You can host your test panel, and you can assess data and analytics from your test as well. We collect most usability and the UX metrics. And then we're also planning meetups like this one. And we already now want to invite you for the next one. And that's actually going to be a bit different from the others you have participated in, because that's going to be a Preely masterclass. Here I will take you on a tour of the Preely platform, show you how to set up a test, how to share it, how to analyze the data, and also which usability and UX metrics you can collect. And furthermore, we're so happy to say that we are joined by Adobe XD team, and they will come and share some of their secrets as well. So we're looking very much forward to that, and that's going to be in March. You can already now sign up via our homepage, preely.com, for that event. So please go in there and sign up, because I definitely believe that we're going to have a blast in that masterclass. I think that was all. Kevin, awesome to see you. I'm happy to have you in this meetup, and I've been looking very much forward to this. And of course, I say this all the time, but I'm in the lucky position of also choosing who I want to talk to. So I've been looking very much forward to setting UX in the scene of a more scaled up environment. So I think just take it away.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. I know you can reply to me, but I'll just imagine you all saying, "Good morning, Kevin." And let me see if I can get my, let's see now if we can get the technology to work. Okay, are you seeing anything?
Yep, it works.
Okay, cool. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about scaling design in Maersk, and a little bit about me first, no, a little bit about Maersk first. So those of you who don't know Maersk, we're a big Danish company. Most of the people here are probably from Denmark, so we'll assume that you know about Maersk. Traditionally seen as a shipping company, but more and more, framing ourselves as an end-to-end logistics company and as a tech company, because we know that it's through technology that we're going to be able to integrate our customers' logistics for them. It's a big company, 80,000 globally, operating in 130 countries. And I think one of the things that I think is what motivates me for working for Maersk is that this idea that we're enabling global trade. Especially under the pandemic, we've seen the need for things that just need to keep on moving. So to get toilet paper from wherever it's made to the shelves in Netto, or more importantly, vaccines, that sort of stuff. So a little bit about me. There I am in the days when you can still get a haircut. I'm originally from Ireland. I studied computer science and linguistics and French in Trinity College in Dublin. I loved French and linguistics. I wasn't maybe great at computer science, but I understood enough to be able to understand that that the systems that we use and develop need to be simple. Before I moved to Denmark, I was a librarian in public libraries in Ireland. And I moved to Denmark then in '98 together with my wife, who's Danish, and we now have 2 kids. We live in Bausfjord. When I moved to Denmark, I got a job in Nokia, and I was there for 13 years. So basically taking Nokia from the heady days of the 3210 to where they are now. And I can't take full credit for that. I think there was a Steve Jobs that kind of helped that journey a little bit. And when Nokia closed down in 2011, I moved to a small digital agency for a couple of months, and then moved from there to Maersk in 2012. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is scaling design in Maersk. And again, I can't take credit for bringing Maersk to being a design-centric company from where it was when I joined. There was lots of other people involved, and I think when we talk about scaling design, I'm talking about an 8-year journey. It doesn't need to take 8 years. The timeline here also reflects Maersk's journey and the journey of user experience generally, I think. So scaling now will look a lot different than it did in 2012. And when Tina asked me to do this presentation, I was a bit sort of, what am I going to tell these people? These are like, this is the cream of Danish design and user experience. And I said, well, okay, one thing that's irrefutable is this is my story. So this is a little bit of what I've experienced, and hopefully you can get some inspiration or some ideas from that. And I'd love to hear your views and experiences, either through the questions afterwards, or you can contact me later on. I would also, there's a couple of other caveats. One is that it's not a particularly visual presentation. I do many different types of presentations. This is one of the ones where there's a lot of bullet points. So people in my design team will probably kill me for doing this, but so it's more about the story, I think. So if you want, you can treat it like a podcast. Just close your eyes or look out the window or get a cup of coffee or go for a walk or something. So, but I hope you enjoy it, and we'll move on. So a little bit of context. As I mentioned before, Maersk is an enterprise-sized company. It's massive, 80,000 globally. The technology department of about 4,000 or 5,000. We have a global reach, and we're not traditionally thought of as a tech company, as I mentioned before. But over the last 5 and certainly the last 2 or 3 years, the transformation has been going on to really drive the meeting of technology and business, and that is, it's just a clear focus on design, but maybe not a clear idea of what it actually means and how we're going to use it. One of the things that transformation has done is brought it from being very waterfall projects to more agile products and platforms. So some of the things I share here will translate well, and others maybe not so much. So we're going to talk. This is one of the few visual slides I have. So it's just kind of just to indicate the way the scaling has worked. So we go from being the small team of 1 to growing slightly to being a more diffuse groups of design teams to being a more consolidated design team, and to what we have now, which is a design community. So I'll walk you through these kind of one at a time, and give you some reflections on each phase. So the first one is the team of 1. This is from Pelle Linjeverden. I haven't actually seen Pelle Linjeverden, but I've read the book. In English is probably Pelle Alone in the World. So the team of 1 is where you start off. So I started in Maersk in 2012, and as far as I know, I was the first permanent in-house UX designer in Maersk. That's in 2012. That's kind of gives an indication of where we were. It's not that long ago. And I came from Nokia, where design was everywhere. I mean, there was interaction design, there was industrial design, the design of the phones. We had design studios and so on. and then came to Maersk and was alone. And at that stage, scaling wasn't on my mind. I was just like, okay, just get in, do the work. And I think one of the things I noticed was that I would need to compromise a little bit on my approach to design, because I had an idea in my head of how design works well. You do research, you do ideation, it's the kind of design thinking approach, which was understood in Nokia, maybe not always very well executed, but still it was understood. And this was different then. So I was working on the design of internal workflows, where the kind of, at that stage, the mentality was, well, it's for internal users, so why would it need to look nice? And there's just so much wrong with that statement. And you kind of, as a designer, you kind of go, oh God. And what I look back on now is that what I spent a lot of the time was understanding the landscape. So just trying to figure out not just the business landscape. That's just to understand shipping at that stage was really difficult. And 8 years on, I'm still not, maybe there's still things I'm learning. But also the landscape with regards to design and how it fits in. So as I mentioned, you need to accept compromise, but not at any cost. So if someone says, can you we've just launched this, can you now make it look nicer? Can you do a logo? You take a deep breath and you say, okay, we can, but, and then you need to define, and explain to them how you would have done it differently. And one of a good method of that is to look at the design maturity of the place you're in. And there's a lot of design maturity frameworks. Envision have a really good one developed by Leah Beauty. But you can also just take it down, because that's very much about the overall design maturity of the company. If you need to take it down a step, maybe just use something like the design thinking process, which everyone knows nowadays. At that stage, it was still okay. In Maersk, it certainly wasn't very well known. But if you think of the design thinking process, it has recognizable chunks of things to do, and you can use that then to kind of find the gaps. So you can find okay, what's the issue here? The issue is that I'm being asked to do stuff after it's been launched. Okay, let's take a step back then and say, okay, how do we do prototype a little bit better? Or if we want to even go all the way back to the start, let's talk to some users. And you can identify these small initiatives, which don't seem like very much at the time. And it could be like customer interviews, even usability tests, ideation sessions, that sort of stuff. And by doing that, then you start to find your allies. So the people who understand it, who get it, or the people who you've convinced that this is actually a good thing to do. Because then you're already starting at a very small scale to prove the worth of design, and you're doing it through practical examples. So it's not sort of just some weird, very diffuse sort of, this is really cool, design is really important. And that gives you a bit of momentum, and it allows you to sow the seeds to start growing. So then you start to grow the team a little bit. It's the A team, a smaller team of experts. And the background to this movement, so I moved to enterprise architecture in late 2013. Even that in itself kind of indicates that large companies often find it hard to kind of place design. They don't really know what do you actually do. And this is 2013 we're talking about, so it's still a couple of years back. So they place it in the PMO or in test, because you do usability tests, don't you? Or in enterprise architecture, which actually kind of made sense because of something that looks across all the development that's been done. And at that stage, I was tasked with building a design team, and it was a small team then of specialists with kind of complementary skills. So I looked at what I was good at, and it was the things I wasn't good at. So I started to filter. So visual design was one of the things. If anyone's seen any of the designs I've done, visual designs, they'll know why I chose that. But also, someone who was a broader skilled designer who was interested in doing research, for example. And then that small team then allows it to focus on one area. So we were allocated to one specific area, but we evangelized widely. So you start again sending missionaries out into the company and getting to do either small tasks or presentations to show and tell. And this new blood then allows you, the first step at scaling even more. So but there's a choice to be made at that stage, because you need to understand, how you're going to use that increased capacity. Are you going to increase the output? Are you going to do more? Or are you going to look at the process? You're going to do it better. So the do more thing is sometimes the obvious one, because you increase the demand, you can cover more projects or products, you'll get a broader reach. The risk is that you remain as this sort of lipstick on a pig function. So you're only just scratching the surface. If you focus on the process, you get better quality end to end. So you will have proper research done, you have proper ideation done, you have proper prototyping and test, and then over to release. You will move towards your North Star a lot faster, because you're starting to fill out those gaps. The risk there is that the perception is that the return on investment for the new team is low, because the guy who gave you the mandate to build up the team is going to go, okay, you now have 4 of you guys, and you're still only doing this amount of work for this product. And that's where you need to go in and explain, okay, well, these are the differences we're making. So again, this now is the first step. It's a smallish team. It can be 5-6 people. And what happens then often is that you start looking over the silo wall, and you start to find your kind of long lost friends that are out on the rest of the company. And again, this is remember, this is a big company, with lots of different, at that stage, lots of different silos, so lots of different areas that are working on different things. So the idea here is that, all these smallish teams that are popping up now around the company, you start to reach out to those. So this is what happened at this stage was that I joined the new ventures team. So the UX team at that stage, led by me, joined the new ventures team, which is a small team focused on internal disruption. So it was fun, but fairly low impact, kind of an innovation ideation type place. We added a couple of developers and a couple of business analysts, and it was still quite a small unit. At this stage, the value of design is better understood. So there's more examples of design working well. In the e-commerce space, so Maersk.com was really starting to focus on user experience. So they had also built up their own design competences. We have marketing people who are spending more time on proper visual design. So there was a need to kind of, not a need, but kind of a feeling that we should probably be working together. And it was kind of this very careful dance around, okay, well, what exactly do you do? And are we doing the same stuff? And it made sense to align some of those efforts and processes and the tools and so on. Again, the challenges of this new consolidated world is that there's always be, when you start to grow a little bit like that, there'll be a drive to formalize and standardize the design practices, and that's standard operating procedure for bigger companies. They want to be able to make this repeatable, and it can be a good thing. So you get some buy-in from stakeholders, you can align expectations, and so on. But as we all know, design is very messy. So and I'll use this fairly cliched image, that it's very messy, and then you get this kind of nice, calm flat line at the end. And the flat line is the thing that will often tick the boxes for bigger companies, because that's order and it's less chaotic than the other one. I think the problem with this image, of course, is that flat line is temporary. It should be temporary, because there'll be chaos again after that. So you need to try and strike that balance between process and chaos. So you need to embrace the chaos. And I think, you know, I don't want to be a kind of a salesperson for design thinking, but the design thinking process is a good framework again to use, because it's suitably structured. So there's recognizable elements that you can almost assign people to, and you can recognize them and you can repeat them. But it also embraces the unpredictability. So, you know, it doesn't always need to be done in that order. You know, you might hop bits over, you might go back here. And I think that element is good. But it's one of the things you need to kind of, you'll probably need to face. Another one which I thought, you know, is they're quite negative words: land grabbing and empire building. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But what will happen is, you know, again, design has shown its value, so it's seen as something that's good, possibly a little bit trendy. So people will want to own it. And I often wonder why that is. You know, is it kind of internal empire building? I don't see so much of that anymore. Certainly in Maersk, you know, there's a more collaborative mindset. Or is it a genuine desire to promote the work? You know, is there someone who actually wants to consolidate and say, this is really important, we want to do that? Or could it be something around that people want to make sure their own area isn't neglected? So like if you know, if we were working on internal screens and they said, well, we need to focus on our customers, let's just move all the designers over there. And these kind of things can happen. Again, it's a challenge and something probably just to be aware of. You may not have that much power to change it, but again, showing the value of design in your specific areas is probably quite important there. The other one is, yeah, the quest for the legendary seat at the table, and this often becomes a focus or even an obsession for some people. You know, design needs a seat at the table, and this seat at the table always kind of it always kind of amused me a little bit, because you know, it's like we're not taking our own medicine. So what problem are we trying to solve with this? Why do we need a seat at the table? What do you expect to achieve with that? You know, usually it's because design is not being used in the right way. So it's because we're being involved too late. We're not involved in some of the, you know, the more conceptual work. And it's just, well, if we had a seat at the table, we'd be involved in this. And that's not necessarily true. And if we were proper designers, we'd look at that problem and say, okay, are there other ways to, you know, what are we trying to achieve, and are there other ways to solve that? You know, and you're not going to get to be a member of the leadership team by standing at the door with a placard saying, "Let us in, we're design." So maybe, you know, maybe park that idea for now and just get designing, because it's through the demonstration of value that you're going to get that recognition. I think it's the recognition people are looking for. So there's a lot of challenges, but one thing is clear is that design is certainly getting noticed at this stage. Which brings us to the next phase, which is the agency, when we start to get a more solid identity of what we are. And this is where we start to define really what the design team is going to look like. So in 2017, myself and the team I was working with moved to Maersk Digital, which was a small product-centric organization. It was about, I think in the end, we're about 120, 130 people, all based in Copenhagen. Really focusing on product teams. So, you know, standalone, long-standing product teams with a product owner, a couple of developers, a designer, data scientist, whatever you needed, but they focused on solving problems. And there was a lot of support from the management of that organization for design. So he realized, it was Ibrahim Gutchin who was leading that team. He realized that the design was going to be really, really necessary. And we scaled quite rapidly at that stage, from four and me to around 18 plus a couple of design students. And it was really exciting time. There was a lot going on. The move towards the product-centric organization was really exciting. It's a really good place to be for design. And I was leading the design team, which within Maersk Digital. And there was a very strong sense of identity in that team. So we were, both inwards, so everyone felt that they were part of the team, but also outwards. So we were seen by Maersk, the rest of Maersk Digital, as being a strong element and an important element. It allowed us to focus on design disciplines much more. So we had visual design, and we changed from being UX designers to product designers, which is a very, very small change, but important. And we built up the research area to being something that's standalone. So designers should always be doing as much as their own research as possible, but to be able to enable the proper bulk of research to be done that we needed to feed into this organization, we needed to have UX researchers, really dedicated and skilled anthropologists. Now there's some challenges with this as well, of course, always challenges. One of the things was that it was a separate team within digital. So when you're growing the team, you're growing in parallel. So you're potentially always playing catch up. So if a new product team is spun up, oh, we need a designer for that as well, or do we? We probably do. Well, so it becomes a kind of again that dance that we need to dance around, and you need to match supply with demand. And this balance can be really tricky, because if you've got too few designers, what it will end up happening is that you'll split them across teams, and that's a disaster. If you've got two very different product teams and you're splitting a designer's work across the two, no one's going to be happy. The designer's going to be frustrated. The product teams are going to be annoyed that they don't have all the stuff that the designer's going to give them. So what you'll see is products going alone. Let's say we have a product owner who can do user interviews. Yeah, probably can. He should be able to, but and we've got a front-end developer who can do a bit of design, and it's not great. So it's you really want to have design as a central part of the product team. If you've got too many, of course, you have disengaged designers who are sitting around just making stuff up to do, and that's just as frustrating. They'll also start asking questions about luxury employees. So what are these guys actually doing? Why are we paying for these two designers who aren't working on a product? So and what happens with that then is that design can be seen as being an optional thing, a nice to have thing. Even in a smallish organization like that, it was still a bit of an issue. And what happens then is that one of the other things with having this agency setup is that you need a design team manager. That was my role, and that person needs to be a design leader. So you need design skills. You need to be able to speak to non-designers about the value and the process and the elements of good design. You need to be able to build relationships. You need to also be able to grow and engage your team. So you need to make sure that they have the tools they need, they have the level of trust that they're going to need. You need to manage upwards and sideways. You need to represent design and then vouch for it higher up in the organization, but also to your peers, to product owners, to heads of software, and so on. And then there's all the other crap you have to do. And this is the thing that's quite interesting, because you'll have to manage budgets. You'll have to approve expenses, plan holidays, spend time on managing meetings, all the other stuff that takes you further and further away from design stuff. Because it's the design stuff that's the reason you probably became a designer, not to fill out Excel forms, Excel sheets with predicted budgets for the next 2 years. So the bureaucracy can be a killer. So you've got this kind of weakened manager role, potentially weakened, and the risk of design as being seen as a nice to have thing. How can you address that? Well, we go back to our friends in the 60s, and we look at the communities of it's not hippies, but so the community then it's a formalized network, but it links all the design expertise in a new way. So Maersk Digital, which was this small internal product-focused experiment, really, merged with the rest of IT. In 2019, we became technology. And there was a fear for a lot of people who were working in Maersk Digital that, well, that's the end of that. That didn't work very well. But what actually happened was that they wanted to take the learnings from Maersk Digital into the broader organization and roll that out to the 5,000 other technology and IT people. So a major reorganization. We changed the focus. We looked at product organization instead of the old project one. And later, which we are now, is we're organized around platforms. So we have products and platforms. And myself and my colleague Alex Livingston, who was responsible for the e-commerce area at that stage, you had to make some choices then. So if we looked at, you know, how we were going to organize, we could continue on. We could merge the two design teams and have a central design agency. But I think, you know, reflecting on the way it had worked before, the idea that it becomes a nice to have, and that we spend less time doing actual design work. We decided to kind of federate it out. So we want design to be part of the DNA of the organization. So design now becomes part of the product team, an integral part of the product, not something they borrow in, not something they have to hire in from this agency, not something they have to allocate it. It's just part of the team. And this is obviously a very strong thing to promote design throughout the whole organization. So if someone is building a product team, one of the elements they'll have is a designer. One of the risks that we saw here was that, and it was raised very quickly by all the people who've been working in the design teams, was like, oh, does that mean I'm going to be reporting into some like a software developer? And that's almost like the worst thing that could happen to a designer. And it's a bit unfair on software developers, in fairness. And yes, that was what it was going to mean. So they wouldn't be reporting into a designer anymore. And that was a real fear. And we understood that. So they were worried about it. Who's going to look after my professional development? Who's going to look after, you know, my tooling? Who's going to look after, you know, reviewing the work I do? So what we did was we set up the community of practices system, which is and it wasn't just for design. So similar questions were being asked by data scientists, by Scrum Masters, by product owners, and the community responsibilities. Then that's where all the fun stuff I mentioned that the design team manager has. That falls under the remit of the community. So I'll tell you a little bit about how that works. So the community then it acts a little bit like a trade union. So we have the hierarchical organization with all these product teams, and across that then you have the communities. So looking after the interests of, for example, design. And there's a load of good stuff coming out of communities, because the first thing is that while initially each community will have a lead, that's my role right now. Over time, design leadership will be democratized. So in a community, you don't have one leader. So what we'll see is that we'll see the leaders bubbling up to the top, and over time then we'll have 3, 5, 10 leaders. So at the moment it's myself and Alex who are I'm the lead, and Alex is the co-lead. But that's just to get it rolling, to get it set up. So over time there'll be a community full of design leaders, which is a beautiful thought. One of the other advantages is that all the stupid stuff is transferred to a place where it actually makes more sense. So if you're talking about budgets, you have that allocated to the person who's responsible for that part of the organization. So it makes a lot more sense. Even something as simple as holiday requests. So why would I accept or approve a holiday for someone who I know nothing about? I don't know what they're working on at the moment, so I could have 3 weeks off right up to a major release. One of the other strengths of the community is that it's open to non-designers. So in the other setup, it's an organizational construct. So you have a design team. Here it's a community, so you can invite people with design interests. So we have a lot of product owners who join our meetings, you know, front end developers, so the ones who are really design interested. We have people from other parts of the organization joining and so on. And that's a real strength, because through that then the community increases the influence of design. So it becomes more of a grassroots movement. And you have, you know, people joining from other you know, non-design elements, and you also have the designers and being rooted in the product teams themselves. One of the questions often asked is, how do you ensure quality in that, in this more fluid community system? And there's a couple of ways you can do that. There's obvious ones, like you do quite structurally. You can kind of say, well, we have design principles which we all agree on, and which we will adhere to, or try to follow at least. Or you can you have a design system, which we also have, which gives you kind of the building blocks, so you don't need to reinvent all the time. So we kind of start to align stuff there. I think more importantly, it's about the mindset. So, you know, you ensure quality through trust and through sharing, and it becomes more merit-based. So, you know, the alternative is that you have one guy who's kind of the big, the grand poobah of design, and he approves everything, but it all has to go through him, which is, you know, horribly inefficient. And also, you know, you want to make sure that he's doing it right. So if I was leading all these people and saying I need to approve everything, I would need to know just as much about each of the products that they're working on as they do. You know, if a designer is working on a product, they know the customers, they know the technical strengths, they know they have the data they need to use. So of course they're the ones who should be making the decisions. There's also the thing, you know, I mentioned in the digital design team, we had a very strong identity, and how do you get that in the community, which is a bit more fluid and open to more than just designers? And that's a really good question. It is something I won't say we've struggled with it, but something we're very conscious of. It's and one of the things we're going to do in the first quarter this year is to look at a charter for the design community in Maersk, which will kind of, you know, gather us around and say, you know, this is how we work. These are the values we have. This is what we do. And I think we'll hopefully strengthen our identity a little bit more. So yeah, so what's next? What will the future hold? And this is maybe a little bit more about organizations than design necessarily, but I think there's an element of design in it as well. So one of the things that's happening in Maersk at the moment is that we see that the old hierarchical structure of command and control it isn't great for releasing innovation. So what we're going to try and do, or what we're doing at the moment, is inverting that pyramid. It's a lot of big companies are doing it. So you'll have the people who are doing the real heavy lifting. They'll be at the top. So the most important people. So you've got design and development and the product owners, and they're the ones who need to be empowered to do this, and need to be, you know, an open, collaborative environment where we can really spin some great ideas out of. And that's a very strong signal to send. It's also a much flatter organization, so there's fewer layers in between the people who are doing stuff and the people who are supporting them. So, and I think what we'll see then is kind of the rise of the individual contributor. So, in the old days, if you wanted to have a career in design in Maersk, and I think the same is true of a lot of other companies, you had to go the leadership role. So you got to a certain level of being a designer, and then you had to make a switch. If you want to go to the next job levels up, job grades, it's leadership or management. We're changing that, so we're now expanding the role of the individual contributor, so you can have a career path that reflects that. And I think through the community as well, we have the framework for more design leaders to be grown and to be nurtured. And I think one of the things for design to think about in this setup is that design on its own is nothing. It is literally nothing. It's just drawn pictures, basically. So you need to have the human element of it. You need to have the problems to solve. You need to have the output at the end. So the value creation. And when you look at the role that design can have, I think what we're going to see is the focus on collaboration. So I mentioned before, we had this very high level, a lot of stuff happening at the top, and that's chaos. That's where the chaos is going to be. And as I mentioned before, what we're good at is the ability to facilitate. So I think we're going to focus a lot more on facilitation, so we can facilitate the collaboration across these things. How are we doing time-wise? No, not too bad.
Okay.
And then we have, and then where I think we still think of design as being a technical thing. So it's to do with technology, it's to do with products and so on. I think we need to start thinking of design beyond designers and beyond technology. So beyond designers, certainly with it, we have product owners and developers. We need to have those as design thinkers. Maybe not design doers. That's what we're good at. It's our core competences that are our superpower. But they need to understand. They need to be accepting of design thinking generally, but also beyond that as well, because I think that's happening now through product organizations. But you need to look at HR, finance, and operations, these sort of areas where they have people and they have problems, and they're the two things that you're going to need to drive design. So if you think of design as human-centered problem solving, they have all the necessary elements for that, and eventually then it will become, design will move away from being, wireframing and designing logos to being part of the culture. It's part of the way we do business. It's part of the way we tackle the problems we have, because companies are always going to have problems. Customers are always going to have problems. We need to solve those, and we need design. And then you can start talking about the seat at the table again. So does it make sense then at some stage when design has become part of the culture that you need a VP of design to make sure that it's invested in, to make sure that it's grown properly. And this is a kind of weird, because in this inverted pyramid, what does that role then look like? You've got a community who's providing design leadership. So what does that VP of design do? And maybe it's just a supporting structure for that. Okay, there was some very random thoughts at the end there, but I hope you can use it for something. Thank you. Here's my email address and my LinkedIn profile. You're very welcome to just stop sharing. To contact me if you have any questions after, or I think we're going to go through the questions now.
Yeah, I think that was a very interesting talk, and I can also see in the QA section that a lot of people can see similarities with what you're talking about in their organizations as well. So I think there's a lot of things that is quite shared. So there also is a lot of great question. And I would actually like to start first, because I've been in different organizations, and you talked about this having a seat at the table, that you should prove that you should have this seat at the table. But how did you actually get the resources to scale your team without having the seat at the table?
Yeah, I think I mentioned at the start, we talked about the idea of you need to find your allies. So yeah. There are people in all organizations who are open to the idea of design, and who will be able to encourage you and to promote, along with you, the value of having a good design practice. And I think, as I mentioned at the start as well, there's going to be a lot of compromise. You're going to do stuff that you really feel, okay, this is not the way I would have done it. I'll do it now, and that just gives you a bit of buy-in. So you need to use that buy-in to kind of start conversations. And again, you don't need to go all out and say, okay, stop everything. We're going to stop all the process you're doing right now. We're going to start with, we're going to half a year of customer research. That's never going to happen. No one's going to let you do that. you can't stop things. So you need to jump in halfway through and say, okay, what can I do here and now? Even if it's just a small, to move the meter a small bit. You know, and it's also useful maybe to look for the real eye-opener things. So take a product that's already live on the market and look at the customer feedback from it. You know, don't allow people to ignore it. So go out and sit with them. It's kind of hard these days, or do a Zoom call with them and just ask them very honestly and openly about how they feel the product works. Because that will hopefully, if it's a good product, they'll be delighted and you can build on that. But you can always ask them about, you know, try to understand the other pain points they have. You know, how could we then grow? So there's always something you get to talk to customers. It's you know, there's always something. So that's where I'd usually focus, because that's irrefutable. You can't go back and say it's not my opinion. I think it's a great product, but the customers think it stinks. So we should probably do something about that, shouldn't we? So that becomes a bit. So that's probably where I start. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that you actually then, instead of having the seat at the table, bring value to the table, right? And then bring so much value that they can't ignore you. So that's a great strategy, right?
Yeah, it's you need to build it up from the bottom. I say if you can demonstrate the value of what you've done, even on just a couple of products, a couple of areas, and also have people. You know, the allies thing is quite. You need to be a strategist in that sense. You need to have the people who will actually promote you as well. I don't mean in a career sense, but who will promote the value of the work you're doing.
Yeah. It makes sense completely. So Rasmus is asking, he is very interested in hearing more about how the software developers and testers should work together with the designers, focusing on software testing when working agile. And in his case, that's Scrum.
Okay. Well, together with the designers for the software test. Yes. Okay. I think if you're working in a proper product team, and this is something I always push a little bit, you need to almost take a little bit of a startup approach. So I think we talked to what's it called? Daugaard. What's his first name? I can't remember his first name. The last guy who was on.
Bjarke.
Bjarke.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bjarke. Last time he was talking about the way that the roles are kind of much more fluid. So as a designer, you'll be expected to do other stuff as well. And I think it's similar here. So I always love it if a software developer or a tester has an interest in being involved in some of the ideation sessions and some of the, especially putting developers in front of customers is just brilliant. So I don't know if that answers your question. If not, always just grab me later on. But yeah, so I think I think as well, if the designer at that stage can has put some more high level goals, it enables the developers and testers to kind of understand what it is we're trying to achieve here. Possibly also in combination with the product owner.
And I actually also have a small thing here, because during my PhD, I actually trained software developers in like performing minor usability and UX work as well. And there's a lot of resonance from their side as well. And also just being able to bring these people out into the real world and observe different tests. It's just, it's such a little thing, but it's such an eye opener. So I think that's also a good way to go concerning.
I think too often we see software developers as the kind of the delivery guys. So we're going to do all the cool stuff here, and then we just hand it over to them. Even in small teams, that happens. I think it's just a disaster, because you need to have the technical input. And they,
exactly.
Data scientists and developers are the ones who will really come up with some mind-blowing ideas, approaches, because they'll say, well, if we just, I like your idea, but if we just change it a little bit, we can have it done faster and it'll be much more efficient. Okay, cool, whatever. That input in the ideation.
You're completely right. And I also think that's why, for instance, design sprint are so used, because you're actually bringing the technical people at the end of the design sprint to actually check the feasibility of your prototype in that case, or your concept in that case, and then actually work from there. And also because I've also been sitting as a PO, and sometimes I had an idea that, okay, we should do this, but I didn't care if it was A or B. And then it was actually nice to have the technical people in saying, you know, like resource wise, you should go with A because the other one takes like double time to code, for instance, right? So there's a lot of things there, and also just to have this shared understanding and shared language within a product team I think that's very, very beneficial in general. So I think that was a quite good both answer and question. So we have another question here. So who is responsible for the design system? Is there any central unit or do people contribute from different teams?
Yeah, so the design system it's treated as a product in here. So we have a product team where it was actually started in Maersk Digital. We started building it there. And then when the whole thing was merged together in technology, we found there was actually 3 design systems in Maersk, all with kind of slightly different angles. So we've now consolidated those 3. The way it works, and this is really important, is that it's not a design police, so they don't decide what's good or bad. And it's more after the fact. They're always going to be playing catch up, and that's intentional. So they have, they started with the very standard things. How do we do radio buttons and forms? Really, really basic. Start with that, design them really well, and then build on that, and then enable those then to. So the designers work in parallel, and if you need to build a date picker from scratch, for example, first of all, you figure out within the community, has anyone else done date pickers? Do we need to align and work on this? Then you develop it. And if it's a very special case you need, just go and do it. You don't need approval. But what will happen then at the end is when it's developed and designed properly, it can be brought back into the design system. If we think this is something that a lot of people are going to need to use. So yes, we bring it back in now. So it's always updating, but it's growing organically together with the rest of the design.
Okay, so we have a question from Pia, and Pia says hi from the Nokia days, and that's actually also goes hand in hand with the design system. If you can tell a bit about like how you have changed things. I think you have touched upon that, but also how did you have any governance model around, like, do you have any governance model around the design system?
Yeah, hi Pia, and you can't. It's very sad you can't say hi to me back. A governance model. Yes, there is a process in place. But it's quite, I won't say it's quite loose. It's quite democratic. So there's, what we're really conscious, we didn't want the design system to restrict people. It should be an enabler. It should be enable people to, if you're a designer, you don't want to spend time designing forms. That should be the stuff you just take off the shelf. Great, we do all that. All the radio buttons, drop downs, all that stuff is done. Now I can focus on the really meaty stuff. So that's why I mentioned that there's the design system and the designers feed into that as it goes along. We could probably fill a whole session about the design system. We can ask Steve who's leading it. But like we can have a chat about that, Pia, if you want to. Be happy to engage with the design system themselves.
And also think from the Preely perspective, like if anybody are up for hearing more about design systems and so on, then let us know, because then we'll definitely have a meetup about design systems, because it's something that is very current right now in the organization. So let us know.
It could be kind of interesting to see the different approaches and how. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So we have another question here. So what about UX roles, which are more shared among different teams? For instance, UX researchers who might be shared among multiple teams.
Yeah. So, and this is one of the kind of the challenges we see when we have this very product focused. As I mentioned, the designers are down in the teams, but you will have cross-functional work. So a lot of the visual designers, for example, work across groups of products, because there may not be enough. You've got a design system which gives you some direction around the design. You may not need to be doing a lot of visual design work on top of that. So they're usually shared. Research has been moved out of technology to sales and marketing. but a lot of the research is now being done by the designers themselves. I think what we're going to see fairly soon is a realignment of that, because it makes sense that marketing have research, obviously, but the more UX specific research needs to be organized in a different way. So that's one of the things we're looking again this year. But again, you would probably have the way we're organizing platforms, right? You've got Maersk.com platform, which is the e-commerce platform. It would make sense to have someone looking at the end-to-end journey and exploring possibilities there. We could have someone working on business products. We already have that. We're working together with our consumer insights team, working on insights, and then using proper design thinking methods to extrapolate value from those.
It makes sense. So I think we have time for one last question. So Simon asked, how I work with design ops. Is that the role of the community to coordinate and lift that? Yeah.
So we in the old world, we had a specific design ops person, just one guy who was doing all that. That now falls under the remit of the community, which is so basically me right now. But we have smaller working groups who are looking at, for example, for tooling, and we work across the community then to define stuff like processes and so on. But yeah, it becomes a community thing.
Yeah, sounds great. So I think we are out of time now, but thank you so much, and we'll continue the questions in a couple of minutes somewhere else and send it out to you guys afterwards. But thank you so much. I think it was a very interesting talk, and also, as you also point out, go very much hand in hand with what Bjarke talked about last time as well. So I think it was very nice to have that perspective on UX and design teams in bigger organizations. So awesome.
Cool.
So
thanks very much
yeah.
for your time.
And to all of you behind the screen, thank you for joining. Remember to sign up for the masterclass. And again, if you have any ideas or suggestions for topics you would like to hear during these meetups, or some people that you would like to hear talk about how they are working and so on, please let us know, because that's what we're here for. And keep an eye on your inbox. We will share both Kevin's slides, a recording of this session, and also the other materials mentioned during the session as well. So I think that was it. So thank you for now. Thank you for joining, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.